My Adventures with Superman was back this week on Adult Swim with a brand new episode entitled Let's Go to Ivo Tower, you say. I'm Cape Joel, and this is the video series where I give my thoughts and feelings on the episode that was, while also shouting out any comic book Easter eggs or references I can find. So with that in mind, let's get to it, shall we? Picking up basically exactly where last week's episode left off, Lois is still coming to terms with her Superman interview. She's still very disappointed, thinking that Superman lied to her, and while Clark tries his best to comfort her, saying that maybe Superman just is a nice guy with powers trying to make a difference in the world, she's not convinced, much like many people who hear about Superman for the first time. She just can't believe that someone with that much power could be that good. In fact, this little exchange will basically end up making the thematic backbone for the rest of the episode moving forward. It's in this episode too, Lois and Jimmy decide to change up their approach to researching the Superman story, mainly because they've exhausted all traditional and vetted media sources. They instead decide to get some information from the realm of conspiracy and tabloid magazines, some of which just so happen to be from Smallville, Kansas, forcing Clark's hand to try and cover his tracks lest his secret ultimately be revealed. Again, it's always fun to see Clark have problems he just can't punch his way out of. He doesn't like lying, but time and time again he's forced to lie to his friends in order to protect his secret. Granted, it's not all bad news for the intern trio this week, as Perry is actually trusting the three to attend a big fancy gala thrown by Anthony Ivo of AmazoTech. I like this scene a whole lot because it shows that Clark actually does care a whole lot about journalism, and he's able to pick out right away that this Ivo dude is no good, a Silicon Valley scumbag known for corporate espionage and land grabs. Now, in the comics, Professor Ivo was a long-standing classic mad scientist character who not only troubled Superman, but a ton of different heroes. He's perhaps best known for creating the Amazo android, a mechanical terror that could copy superhero powers. He's also had a ton of different looks and designs over the years, from a traditional mousy scientist dude to a monster-faced Dr. Frankenstein, but you know, we'll actually circle back to that by the end. The event will be a black tie affair, meaning the intern trio has to get all dressed up. Clark dons his finest chess club suit, complete with little bow tie, because no doubt, much like in the comics, his parents didn't want him playing football out of fear he might be tempted to use his powers. That's another thing too, My Adventures with Superman is like one of the first Superman stories I can remember where characters actively note the fact that Clark is huge and ripped. I think the real story here, though, actually belongs to Lois, who decides to don, instead of a dress, a much more culturally significant piece of clothing. I can't quite nail it down myself. I assume it's Korean because Alice Lee, the voice actress of Lois, is Korean, even though she's played Chinese a lot in her other work. Also, I've not made a big point to really bring up My Adventure with Superman's colorblind casting choices because, I mean, come on, it's 2023 and it really shouldn't be shocking anymore. Comic books and superheroes offer infinite universes of possibility. If a character not being white pisses you off, then that says more about you than anything. Now, while Perry gave the intern trio instructions to only cover the event as it pertains to entertainment, Lois being Lois refuses not to take the opportunity to speak truth to power and try and get the city's most rich and powerful movers and shakers to open up about their clear and obvious corruption. Again, like I said before, this whole episode is about people's relationship to power. All of the men in this room are supposed to be doing good things, but they only got their power in the first place either by being corrupt or only holding on to it by being corrupt, so naturally Lois is suspicious of everyone like that. In another bit of really solid writing, Clark at first actually wants to try and play nice with these people out of fear of upsetting anyone, including his boss Perry. It's only after Ivo ends up insulting Lois does Clark actually take her lead and start asking the hard questions. Again, My Adventures with Superman so far has been all about Clark trying to find himself and sculpt the Superman persona, and I think it's super clever that that also involves him finding his inner crusading journalist as well, even if it means Ivo and his goons end up chucking him out of the party. This leads to another very sweet little scene between Clark and Lois, wherein she helps him patch up his jacket. We learn here too that Lois has a frosty relationship with her military man father, and that things only got worse between them when her mother got sick and died. Again, this is probably why Lois is pushing herself so damn hard to be a successful journalist so that she can be seen as worthwhile in her father's eyes. This reveal also almost certainly confirms that theory a lot of fans had from the first two episodes that that military dude we saw hanging out with Deathstroke and Waller is almost certainly Lois's dad, Sam Lane. Now, let's talk about our villain for the episode, Anthony Ivo. Again, as I mentioned before, in the comics he was a pretty archetypical mad scientist type. Here, though, the show sees fit to reimagine him as an all-too topical, all-too familiar tech bro jerk who uses words like disruptor, he has a top-knot haircut, he thinks he's funny, he abuses his staff. He puts on needlessly over-the-top spectacles while not so secretly losing his shareholders millions of dollars. Again, take your pick about which actual tech bro they're probably referencing here. Now, Ivo thinks that his next big invention is going to fix all of his money woes, and as a comic reader, I assumed it was going to be the Amazo android, but the show pleasantly swerved me when it turns out that what he's actually working on to help combat the rising tide of supercrime in Metropolis is something he calls the Parasite Mark I suit, a very clear and obvious reference to the Parasite, another very prominent and very famous Superman foe. Fun fact, while most people know the Rudy Jones version of the Parasite from other adaptations, there's actually been several different villains who have used the name Parasite over the years, like Raymond Jensen, Josh Allen, and even two different twins named Alex Alston. And I'm assuming, considering that Ivo's put upon Little Toady in this episode is also named Alex, I'm gonna guess that's who that's supposed to be. It doesn't take long in his new battle suit before Ivo gets corrupted by his newfound power and begins attacking his shareholders. Now, I'm sure when some people first saw this image, their mind instantly went to Evangelion, but for my money, all I could think was the Guyver, even though I feel in saying that I'm probably just admitting my own age. You know what, argue about that in the comment section if you like. With lives in danger, Superman is forced to step on in and make the save, but Ivo more than planned for this. Not only can his Parasite soup absorb Superman hits, but he can also create a force field to siphon off Superman's power when he's not hitting him. His suit also not only gets bigger like it does in the comics, the more energy that he absorbs off Superman, but it also evolves and changes like a big purple Pokemon. It's here that Lois and Jimmy once again prove to be the real MVPs by running interference for Superman, knocking out Alex and helping him take down the force field, making Ivo's fight with the Man of Steel that much more fair. And how does Superman choose to win this battle against a guy he literally can't hit? Simple, he wins the fight by not fighting at all and letting him burn himself out. And oh boy, I gotta say, when the suit does turn on Ivo, it's pretty damn gross. He even gets his melted monster face from some versions of the comics. The real cherry on top of this defeat, though, is that Ivo himself also can't wrap his head around the idea how someone like Superman would be willing to help even though he's not getting paid or getting anything in exchange for it. Now, while the day is saved, sadly the intern trio can't prove Ivo's mob connections, who were supplying him with that same crystal tech that's been showing up all over Metropolis. His vault was cleaned out during the fight, but hey, on the upside, the show made probably one of the deepest comic lore cuts ever by invoking the Gazo crime family. For those who don't know, they were mentioned for maybe like one line in Dark Victory, which was another Batman prequel story. Basically, the Gazos were the Metropolis rivals of the Falcone family, and I love the idea that the real actual mob exists in Metropolis around this time. Lois and Clark's relationship also takes another level in this episode, with Lois letting Clark walk her home, a fact of which ends up leaving poor Jimmy feeling like the odd man out of this trio, a fact of which I'm sure will be important later on. Ironically, Jimmy is the only one who didn't fight with anyone at the party. Again, this is a common trend in the comics too, but Jimmy just kind of fits in anywhere and people just like him. Seriously, read about his love interest history sometime, it'll blow your mind. Now, as the episode comes to an end, Lois is emboldened by breaking this Ivo story, so much to the point she decides to redo her murder board, only to discover that the last piece she needed to bring it all together was actually in Clark's jacket pocket the whole time, which can only mean one thing: Superman and Clark Kent have now and have always been the same person. And so that was Let's Go to Ivo Tower, you say, and for my money, this was probably the best episode I've seen of the series so far. Everything was firing on all cylinders, from the personal character dynamics, to the main storyline progression, to even some really solid action scenes. This is also by far the most thematic episode of the series so far, and you know I'm a sucker for a good theme and a story about how Superman just really is that good and that nice, and how he defies everyone's initial read of him. The final moments also really shocked me too. I assumed that they were gonna drag out the whole is Clark Kent Superman mystery for at least the rest of the season, but here my adventures with Superman also ends up completely defying my expectations by bucking even more story trends. If I wasn't already really invested, this would be more than enough to get me to come back next week and check out how all of this shapes up. But until then, everyone, this has been Cape Joel. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure to follow me both here on YouTube and on Twitter so you always know when my next new Superman video is dropping.